Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. We're at a different time, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we are doing a different time this time, not for the conversation I had with Lawrence, which we might end up doing a different schedule, but he hasn't gotten back to me on that. We're doing a different time today because of something that Tomer needed to do. So the rescheduling is entirely on Tomer and has nothing to do with the North American Reptile Breeders Conference going on this weekend.
Yeah, all complaints can go to my Discord.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. How dare you have a family and responsibilities? I just need to give a shout out to Tyler Stroudarian online for the gift of this lovely T-shirt. Everyone, look at my chest. Everyone.
I can't read it that well from here, but I'm still looking.
Yeah.
Just put your face a little closer until you hear a motorboat noise.
Together we can find the cure.
So I guess this video is going to be demonetized.
In my breasts.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So Second Kings, was it 23? Right?
Yes.
Well, today we should be finishing.
Yes.
Second Kings.
Yes.
Yay!
Yay!
And who is reading today?
I think
read last time.
I think Lawrence should do 23 because that's like the meaty part, I guess.
It's quite
the
long.
meaty part. By meaty, he means it's quite long, but that's okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
By the way, Tomer, someone in chat said, "Oh shit, Tomer has a Discord Insta join." So I posted the link to your Discord.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Join Tomer's Discord. The obvious owner
he almost
cannot
gets
be
it.
kicked out.
He almost gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Lawrence, if you want, we can split the chapter in half or something.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I can read all the way through. It's no problem.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I planned it in half, but sure.
All right. Did you want me to, natural cutoff point for you?
If you can read the whole chapter, then it'll be fine.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. All right, so straight through then is what you're saying.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So chapter 23, Josiah's Reformation. Then the king directed that all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem should be gathered to him. The king went up to the house of the Lord, and with him went all the people of Judah, all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests, the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of the Lord. The king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to follow the Lord, keeping his commandments, his decrees, and his statutes, with all his heart and all his soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. All the people joined in the covenant. The king commanded the high priest Hilkiah, the priests of the second order, and the guardians of the threshold to bring out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels made for Baal, for Asherah, and for all the host of heaven. He burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron and carried their ashes to Bethel. He deposed the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to make offerings in the high places at the cities of Judah and around Jerusalem, those also who made offerings to Baal, to the sun, the moon, the constellations, and all the hosts of heaven. He brought out the image of Asherah from the house of the Lord outside Jerusalem to the Wadi Kidron, burned it at the Wadi Kidron, beat it to dust, and threw the dust of it upon the graves of the common people. He broke down the house of the illicit priests who were in the house of the Lord, where the women did weaving for Asherah. He brought all the priests out of the towns of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had made offerings from Geba to Beersheba. He broke down the high places of the gates that were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on the left at the gate of the city. The priests of the high places, however, did not come up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but ate unleavened bread among their kindred. He defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so that no one would make a son or daughter pass through fire as an offering to Molech. He removed the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun at the entrance to the house of the Lord by the chamber of the eunuch Nathan Melech, which was in the precincts, because, sorry, not because, there's like a little note with a B, it looked like because. In the precincts, then he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. The altars on the roof of the upper chamber of Ahaz that the kings of Judah had made, and the altars that Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of the Lord, he pulled down from there and broke in pieces, and threw the rubble into the Wadi Kidron. The king defiled the high places that were east of Jerusalem, to the south of the Mount of Destruction, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Astarte, the abomination of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. He broke the pillars in pieces, cut down the sacred poles, and covered the sites with human bones. Moreover, the altar at Bethel, the high place erected by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin, he pulled down that altar along with the high place. He burned the high place, crushing it to dust. He also burned the sacred pole. As Josiah turned, he saw the tombs there on the mount, and he sent and took the bones out of the tombs and burned them on the altar and defiled it, according to the word of the Lord that the man of God proclaimed when Jeroboam stood by the altar at the festival. He turned and looked up at the tomb of the man of God who had proclaimed these things. Then he said, "What is that monument I see?" The people of the city told him, "It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and proclaimed these things that you have done against the altar at Bethel." He said, "Let him rest. Let no one move his bones." So they let his bones alone, with the bones of the prophet who came out of Samaria. Moreover, Josiah removed all the shrines of the high places that were in the towns of Samaria that kings of Israel had made, provoking the Lord to anger. He did to them just as he had done at Bethel. He slaughtered on the altars all the priests of the high places who were there and burned human bones on them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The king commanded all the people, "Keep the Passover to the Lord your God as prescribed in this book of the covenant." No such Passover had been kept since the days of the judges who judged Israel, even during all the days of the kings of Israel and of the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was kept to the Lord in Jerusalem. Moreover, Josiah put away the mediums, wizards, teraphim, idols, and all the abominations that were seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, so that he established the words of the law that were written in the book that the priest Hilkiah had found in the house of the Lord. Before him there was no king like him who turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him. Still, the Lord did not turn aside from the fierceness of his great wrath by which his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. The Lord said, "I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and I will reject this city that I have chosen, Jerusalem, and the house which I have said, my name shall be there." Now the rest of the acts of Josiah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. King Josiah went to meet him. But when Pharaoh Necho met him at Megiddo, he killed him. His servants carried him dead in a chariot from Megiddo, brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own tomb. The people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, anointed him, and made him king in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamatul, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, just as his ancestors had done. Pharaoh Necho confined him at Riblah in the land of Hamath, so that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and imposed tribute on the land of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, son of Josiah, king in place of his father Josiah, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoahaz away. He came to Egypt and died there. Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land in order to meet Pharaoh's demand for money. He exacted the silver and the gold from the people of the land, from all according to their assessment, to give it to Pharaoh Necho. So Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebidah, a daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, just as all his ancestors had done. Ugh, that was a lot of talking. So I pointed this out when we did the I forget, I probably did it both times. When we did the golden calf narrative, the setting up of the golden calves of Jeroboam, and also the one in Exodus. So I think I covered it twice, but note how he destroys all these things. These things are destroyed in the same way that the
that Moses
destroyed the thing, and that golden calf. That is just one of the many parallels, and also the God, what was it? The sons passing through the fire verse.
Yeah.
Where was that?
Verse 10.
Verse 10. Okay. These verses are also
Gehinnom.
Oh, right, yeah.
The breaking, the burning, the grinding to dust, the throwing in, in the waters in the case of the first calf. But yeah.
Right. Oh, right. Hold on. The slaughter.
The Hebrew word for like hell, or what's the other word? Like where you get punished and then go to heaven.
Purgatory.
Purgatory, maybe. Yeah. So
I didn't know Jews had purgatory.
No, I don't think Jews do have purgatory.
That's kind of what the hell. That's kind of what the hell is. The hell is like up to 12 months of punishment. Yeah. So Gehinnom, or Gehenna, comes from this place name, which is over here. It's called Ge Ben Hinnom, or Bnei Hinnom. But yeah, it just means the valley of the son of Hinnom, the son of Hinnom, or the children of Hinnom, or just Hinnom. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a place that has been traditionally associated with sacrifices.
Yeah.
But I also want to talk about that slaughter at the end there. He slaughtered on the altars all the priests of the high places who were there. Now, if you remember, after the golden calf in Exodus,
that's 11. Yeah.
That narrative, that was in 20. It looks like. Yeah, that was in 20. There's actually like a lot of polemics, and I know that like it shouldn't be a shock that the chapter that talks about the destruction of all the things you shouldn't have contains a lot of polemics, but it's really interesting how far this goes. So in verse 20, when it says he slaughtered on the altars all the priests of the high places who were there, and burned human bones on them. Do you remember after the destruction of the golden calf, where he's like, hey, Moses is like, anyone that's on my side, come over here. Anyone who's on the side of Aaron and then the golden calf, go over there. and then they split them all up, and then he's like, hey, people on my side, kill the people on that side. So
kill every man his brother, and every man his friend, and every man his neighbor. And the people did according to the law of Moses. The Levites specifically, that was how they won the priesthood.
Levites. Yeah, the Levites got on his side. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which
remember,
oddly, because then Aaron was bared and made high priest of God after the golden calf thing, which is like hypocrisy manifest.
Well, yeah, because the Levites were the only ones that were on Moses' side. They were the only ones that were mad.
They were his tribe.
And remember, when Jeroboam set up the golden calves, it said in that text that he stopped the Levites from being priests and put his own priests in. So this entire narrative, the polemics are against the non-Levitical priesthood.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of hints of that, and this is just another one of those.
The story is looping around, and this is also evidence that a lot of it was written later certainly than any of the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus timeline scenarios, but even after some of these. But it's definitely, this is about power struggle and rewriting history so that your group was always in the right.
And also, the attack on Egypt too, about getting their horses, the references to those other gods, which we'll hear more about in the prophets.
There's also the thing about the prophet whose bones were left undisturbed. That weird story with the prophet who comes and then God sends another prophet after him to lie to him, to trick him into disobeying God's initial instructions, who then becomes overcome with the spirit and prophesies his demise and then buries him and honors him. And it's like, will you guys please just pick a fucking struggle? Like, God appears to be schizophrenic and raging. That prophet is referenced here, and it wasn't that long ago that we covered that story. I was trying to find exactly which verse it was that had that prophet story in it, but it was it was a migraine, that story. It's like God appears to be having a complete schizophrenic fit. Also, if you go back to Deuteronomy, because remember, the hypothesis is that, basically speaking, obviously there's lots of sketch around the edges, but basically the book of Deuteronomy is the book of the law that they're having this big revival around. So everybody's having a big feast and a big party, but a big repenting and a lot of slaughtering and a lot of drama. And if you go back to Deuteronomy 29 at more or less the end of the law portion, you have this dictated renewal of the covenant that totes for real happened after Sinai, before they went into the land for the final time, and just before Moses died, but after the second set of signs that yada, 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 that of course they all saw and were very convincing, and that's why no one ever acted like they'd ever happened. And you have this in 29, we renew the covenant, we make the vows again, yada, yada, because these are the generation that was born in the desert and therefore did not actually see Egypt. And then the promises of prosperity, life and death, the judgment, and everybody making the collective declaration that they are calling this on themselves, they are binding themselves to this oath. And so you can see very much how it's set up. Here is the law, here is what our ancestors did. Really, we didn't just write this yesterday, it totally happened, and we're going to renew it again because this was a renewal, and so it's a tradition. And much real, very belief. But it's set up. It's set up to bring people through the process to lead to them all going, oh, okay, we're all going to renew just like our ancestors did, and then feel obligated because they've given their word.
Got a couple of comments to catch up on because they're stacking up. I'm thinking this is pronounced Rimmer's Brigery. It says, all it may concern is Ammon the same as Amman, capital of Jordan?
Yes.
Okay. And then Raphael C offers $2.
That's Singapore dollar.
$2 Singapore dollars. Okay, thank you. Recent ex-Christian here. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. And congratulations. And then adds a second message, says, Aaron doesn't know this, but he's doing the Lord's work, getting people out of this stupid religious cult.
Woo! Woo!
Thank you
what's
for
funny?
that.
There was a time, a long time ago, before he went completely off the rails. There was I'm not gonna name him, but he's a fairly well, at least on YouTube, fairly well-known Christian apologist. Who, when I first started talking to him, he was, we were like, I was just starting, like, biblical studies, and he was like, I think Jesus would be very happy with what you're doing, studying the Bible. Like, he knew I was an atheist, but he was like, he's just happy you're reading it and you're analyzing it. Which he's a very different person now.
Okay, so this is somebody who was a Christian apologist then.
He's still a Christian apologist now.
He's just
but
crazy.
also went off the rails after that.
Yeah, no, he's gotten a lot worse. Yeah.
Oh, 'tis a pity.
Yeah.
Then my unfinished sock that says, "Don't do what's evil in the sight of the Lord, or do whatever. Either way, like and share the stream." And then my unfinished journey offers $2.22. It says, "Hail Nero, hail Aaron and Co, hail rewriting history."
Mhm.
Did we rewrite history?
No, but the Bible did.
Okay.
6 or 7 times. It's all kind of layered in. It gets a bit messy.
Okay.
Yeah, everything we've read is unclassified.
Oh, this is because we haven't added a journalist to our chat yet, right?
Okay.
P-Town and the
Cutthroat
waiting
Juggalo.
in the background being like, "Oh, they know about me."
Cutthroat Juggalo offers $5 and says, "Hey, if you're reading this, then you know you're loved, and I'm glad you're alive. Also, stop breaking the awesome scale, Mr. Ra." Thank you very kindly. Okay.
You need your own awesome scale. Just
I'm just no good at taking comments or compliments anymore.
Mm.
So, are we moving on to the next chapter?
Yes, actually, because I have no commentary for this chapter.
none
I'm a lazy
whatsoever.
bum. Nope.
I mean, there's a few like just like general comments about this chapter, which is interesting. I mean, and Lawrence brought up, like all of this destruction of high places and stuff, whatever that was, it all crept in. It was all corrupt, blah blah blah. It was, from the truth, whatever. But
Yeah.
and like it also doesn't mention the actual, golden calves. It doesn't mention Dan. You've got like stuff about like where the king stands in the temple, like everyone knows where that is.
Over to the left, underneath the mistletoe.
I mean, it says in the English, like translates it as like he stood by the pillar. The word amud, I mean, it does mean a pillar, but it is
Pillar,
used
yes.
actually in like contemporary Judaism to mean like the place where the person who's leading prayers stands, like the like a what do you call it? Kind of like a. I mean, if it was facing the crowd, it would be a lectern, but
A lectern. Oh, yeah.
only
Or
it faces the wall.
Oh,
but
but who's the one? He does the call and response kind of thing in the prayers too.
Not
yeah,
Chazan.
yeah. So you say Chazan.
Yeah. Chazan.
I mean, I don't want to like, because like I think Sephardim and Yemenites have slightly different traditions about like where they stand.
I
and
mean,
what they say. But yeah.
You're right. We would be here forever if we went over every conceivable traditional variant. But at the same time, it does speak to a familiarity with that setup, at least in some form. But also, I just wanted to point out that of all the violations of the high places and the burning of this, that, and the next thing, the Asherah pole was in the temple. This is in the days of Yahweh and his Asherah. And I've said it before. At one point, she was considered the wife of God. And this very much gives the raging narcissist divorce, probably got caught cheating and is really mad, burns all her stuff on the front lawn, smashes windows, and says, "Look what you made me do. This is all your fault."
Yeah,
that is exactly this vibe.
Yeah. I mean, on that point, it's interesting that most of the Bible, it says, the Asherah, like the Asherah, and it's translated as, the Asherah pole or whatever. But in this verse, is it 4? It says the objects made for Baal, the objects made for Asherah. Like she's being referred to as like as a name, And it seems like everywhere else in the Bible, she's not really referred to by name, but it's more like they've used her name as a designation of a certain cultic object, whether it's a pole or a tree or a grove or whatever. And over here, it's actually referring to like her. And then, of course, when the next time it comes up, like they burnt the Asherah, Lawrence's translation, for example, actually translates it as the image of Asherah because of the context.
Which is not inconceivable. And we can definitely say that, I mean, Lawrence has previously said that he believes that the original ark was like a platform on which the statue of the god was possibly covered, as they sometimes were, because, the sacred. And this would be, the Queen of Heaven would have stood beside this god, the man and wife. And this is, again, it isn't just the rise of monotheism, it's rise of certain of the most vulgar elements of the patriarchy, where you're getting rid of all the feminine counterparts in ideas and trying to be like, oh no, only men rule, only men, and we're only rational ones, and we fight, and we're the best, and ew.
So this is the He-Man Goddess Haters Club?
Yeah. This is God is the original incel.
Although there are later traditions where you get to like the Shekinah, right?
And the Sophia later on. And
right.
There's been some attempts to revive elements of wisdom and so forth. But there's also a pretty strong focused tradition behind refusing to have any of that shit tell me what to do, because I am so special, because I have a dick.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we have verse 4 where it says the king ordered that they take out the objects made for Baal Asherah, and he burned them outside. And then in verse 6 it says he brought out the image of Asherah, or brought out the Asherah, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Blah blah blah. So there were objects for Baal, but there wasn't a image of it.
Yeah, it says that the Hebrew does lack image of.
Right, but I'm saying that it also doesn't mention Baal. Like it's got like the objects of Baal were taken out and burnt, but then it doesn't say.
Right, like was it an idol, or was it like the ceremonial things, like we use these tongs to burn our incense or whatever.
I wonder if if actually still at this point, like the image of El, of Yahweh, was allowed to stay, and how they could have been confused.
This would have been in the south. And the temple of Yahweh specifically, so it would have been Yahweh. El images were often associated with bulls, but this is No,
I'm saying I wonder if like the things that they didn't like, they're like these are the cultic objects of Baal, but the things they liked were like that's just part of Yahweh's image stuff.
Oh yeah, I don't like this. You can have it. Yeah. Oh well, I could see that probably.
Like the image of Asherah obviously had to go, but the image of the male god, that's just Yahweh.
We could repurpose.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just
it wouldn't be the first time. I suppose it depends on how much gold is in the object and whether or not we will be able to reclaim it after we go through whatever form of destruction we're going through. Because, burning wood is very different from burning gold.
Right. I'm just saying that's just my explanation of why there's objects for Baal, but there isn't an actual Baal statue.
Makes sense.
To be burnt. Like why are there objects in the temple, but there's no idol. But there is Asherah, both objects and an idol, or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to hit on something that Isaac mentioned. So in verse 15, where you have the destruction of the high places of Jeroboam, you did mention that there is no Dan, and that's good that you mentioned that, because it's commonly held that the reference to Dan in the Jeroboam narrative is a later addition, because it's not mentioned here.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mention the golden calves at all. So
right, yeah, exactly.
Got another comment. Raphael C offers another 50 Singapore dollars and says, Starbucks coffee on me. and adds, when I was a Christian for 2 years, I became a crazy, intolerant, self-righteous prick. Now I feel free. Bible is absolute trash. RN1, Yahweh 0. Here's somebody going through their angry atheist stage.
Which is valid. I also get pissed off when people lie to me.
I get it. As you should. As you should. And it's the weird thing that believers don't seem to have a problem with that.
Yeah. They're always so surprised when we're upset. I'm like, you like being lied to and manipulated and used? Really? Really?
There also seems to be some sort of differentiation between the high places in Jerusalem and maybe like the other sort of temples, shrines, and stuff. Because, you know, you have one place where he slaughters the priests on the altar and covers them in bones. And but then, for some reason, the priests of the shrines, they're like, I'm guessing, I don't know if this is after like the family of the, you know, the Kohanim, the priestly family group was established, but there were, I guess, some of them were priests in these other places, and they're not killed, but the verse says like they're forbidden from working in the temple. They can't ascend the altar. They can eat the unleavened bread together with their kinsmen. There's two things. One is this is saying that they're equivalent to like a blemished priest who is allowed to eat from the like sanctified food, but they're not allowed to actually work in the temple, and they don't receive, I guess, the tithes and stuff like that. The other thing is that this verse doesn't really fit here. It seems to work better with the later part of the chapter where it talks about the Passover. Right? It says, you know, they did a Passover thing, and then this verse is saying like, well, they can't partake in going up on the altar during the festival. They can eat the unleavened bread, which was connected with the Passover festival, with the rest of the people.
And I recall that when there was back in I think Leviticus, when they were doing the setup for the tabernacle and delineating, well, this lineage from the Levites can do this, but this lineage has to do this. And this lineage is not allowed to do this, but they're supposed to do this. And it was tied in with the name of somebody who they attributed something to. It seems like they may have been writing a later justification for some of these distinctions here, which was ultimately, let's face it, based on loyalty to the cult and its extremism.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the Levitical tribe, and then within them the priestly, the priests who are supposed to be descended from Aaron, and then you've got like the traditional jobs that they did in the temple were divided by which family they were. Within the priestly clan, there were the, you know, the whatever they were called, Yitzharites and stuff like that. Yeah, all right.
Yes, so if nobody else has any comment.
Oh yeah, one more thing. Verse 11, which is a bit weird, right? So the horses dedicated to the sun, the entrance of the house of God, near the chamber of the eunuch Nathan Melech. So it's not, I don't think it's really understood, but like the traditional sort of idea is that there was some sort of procession that went from the house of God to the chamber of this Nathan Melech minister, who possibly lived somewhere outside the city. And it was like they would go on horses and they would like kind of go to the east where the sun would rise and then bring them back, or what, I don't know exactly. So it was like a sun procession which he was burning or whatever. I'm sure Tomer has like a proper explanation of what's going on.
I think I do. If I'm writing about it, I do have it. I mean, it's fair. It's a bit long. It's 9 pages, but like,
that's fine. Yeah, I mean, also I was wrong. I think a few episodes ago when we spoke about which king was it that went to Damascus and saw the altar and came back? Was that Manasseh? Because I mean, in verse 12, right, it says, right, he tore down the altars made by the kings of Judah on the roof by the upper chamber of Ahaz, and the altars made by Manasseh in the 2 courts. So that story that we read a few weeks ago. Was it? I can't remember the name, which king it was. He went to Damascus and he was very impressed, and he came back. He like sent a message to some Levites to build this fancy altar, and then they put it next to the bronze one. In this chapter, it seems to imply that he built two, in the two courts, and then there were also altars on the roof, which I don't remember when that happened, but it says the upper chamber of Ahaz, so it could have just been like over time they had built stuff. I'll let Toma talk about the Mount of Olives thing.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Okay, so I'll start on verses. How you doing it?
I got a couple more comments.
Read the comments. Sure.
Scary Videos says, I don't have money, but please read my message. Lilith Liberated is the most beautiful non-believer ever. She's not even here.
And now she missed it.
Is it supposed to be irony or?
Oh, come on! I'm glad she wasn't here for that comment.
No. No, I meant like they're pretending to. Are they? Maybe I used the wrong word.
I don't.
They're pretending to be a Christian, like who just comes in
so.
to make comments like that.
I got the impression it was sincere.
Oh, okay.
And then Franklin Brown says, "Does socioeconomic status influence religious beliefs?"
I mean,
there's an awful lot of stupid rich people that are believers.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of poor people who are religious. So
I don't know if does being poor make you more susceptible, or is it you're more
being uneducated does,
which might stem from
right, and then also religious groups targeting you. If that makes sense. I think you're more susceptible being taken advantage of by other people in religion than just like, oh, I'm in a bad way, therefore I'm gonna be more religious. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Okay, Tomer.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so on verses 1 through 3, Hens-Piazza comments, the literary centrality of this account suggests its importance. The Deuteronomistic writers assess Josiah as the ideal king. Though no direct speech is heard, the narrative description trains our complete attention upon Josiah. As grammatical subject of the report and center of the ceremony, he directs, goes up, reads, stands, and makes a covenant. Oh, sorry, I have a phone. Just a second.
Okay, Triumphy. What is going on over here?
Well, while Homer
okay,
is,
I guess
answering a message from his booty call.
There is a interesting another thing. There is a what was it talking about? It was like the not the Ashtaroth, that's basic.
The thing about Astarte?
Yeah, like I mean that's just them using the term that I guess the Phoenicians use, right? The Phoenicians worshipped Ashtaroth, but I think the Ashtaroth and Asherah were kind of confused at certain points.
Okay. Okay, so where was I?
I don't remember.
Yeah, sorry.
Because Ashtaroth is just like the West Semitic version of Ishtar, but Asherah is something else, I think, originally anyway. But I think they got confused at a certain point, no?
Bad timing, Lilith. Can you hear me, Lilith?
Sorry about that. Yeah.
We had a comment from Scary Videos. Says, I don't have money, but please read my message. Lilith Liberated is the most beautiful non-believer ever.
Oh, guys, thank you. That's so sweet. I'm sorry I stepped away for just a moment. Honestly, I can't handle the Bible without at the least coffee. And if we did this at a later hour, it would be something more strong. But thank you. I love you guys. I love all my non-believing fam. It is going to be a fun time here, but this show just keeps me going. It's kept me going through a lot of fun times in life. So,
It's got some follow-up messages if you want to read them as well. They're not in the private though.
Yeah, I guess because I don't have 9 pages of commentary.
Oh, good. Okay, then we can be on this forever if you don't have 9 pages.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
It's okay. You start your commentary. I have to help someone with something. I'll be right back. I promise.
What was
Okay.
the other? Okay, well, I'm sure I'll get into it.
I'll start over. So on verses
Yeah, yeah.
1 through on verses 1 through 3, Hens-Piazza comments, the literary centrality of this account suggests its importance. The Deuteronomistic writers assessed Josiah as the ideal king. Though no direct speech is heard, the narrative description trains our complete attention upon Josiah. As grammatical subject of the report and center of the ceremony, he directs, goes up, reads, stands, and makes a covenant. The language of the account continuously conveys the comprehensive nature of what takes place. The narrative leaves no doubt that everyone attended. In addition to listing the elders of Judah and Jerusalem and the people of Judah, the passage also cites the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests, the prophets, and the people, both great and small. The word all is used 5 times to make clear the scope of these various groups present for the cultic event. No one was absent. On verse 3, the king stood by the pillar. Hebrew for pillar is amud, and is rendered as such by Septuagint and Peshitta. We see the pillar in 11:14, where it is the designated place for Joash, according to Rashi, Kara, Sweeney, and Rabiel. Targum reads balcony, and Josephus in Antiquities 1063 wrote that Josiah stood on a platform. Likewise, Vulgate reads step, and Fried pedestal. Cogan, however, writes that there is no evidence for such constructions in the temple. On verse 4, Fritz comments, the purification process begins with the removal of the vessels dedicated to the worship of pagan gods, here identified as Baal, Asherah, and the host of the heavens. The Assyrians did not impose the worship of their own gods on subject peoples, but subjugation to Assyria would call into question Yahweh's power to defend the nation. It is therefore hardly surprising that the way would have been open for the introduction of other gods or religious practices into the temple. Such gods and practices likely represent popular religious practice outside of Jerusalem. The burning of these vessels to ash in the fields of Kidron recalls Moses' destruction of the golden calf at Mount Sinai following the nation's apostasy while he received the Torah from Yahweh in Exodus 32-34. The location in the Kidron Valley makes great sense, since the Kidron separates the city of Jerusalem from the burial sites on the Mount of Olives. The notice in verse 4 that the ashes were carried to Bethel portends Josiah's desecration of the Bethel altar in verses 15 through 18. On verse 5, idolatrous priests, in Hebrew kmarim, from the singular komer, Septuagint has komarim. Very original. Its derivatives appear in Hosea 10:5, like kmarav, and Zephaniah 1:4, kmarim. Cogan writes that the word is borrowed from Aramaic and appears in inscriptions from Neirab, near Aleppo, circa 7th century BCE, and is used to describe a priest of the moon god Sahar, as well as an Assyrian from Ashurbanipal period. As well as an Assyrian inscription from Ashurbanipal's period, where the queen of the Arabs is called Kumirtu, which means a priestess. The Kemarim usually designate priests for other gods, as we see in Targum, Peshitta, Kim Chibotzeko, and Abravanel. Sweeney writes that the removal of priests in outlying areas aids in centralizing both worship and the collection of revenues dedicated to temple and state in Jerusalem. On verse 6, the repeated destruction of the Asherah recalls the destruction of the golden calf. Quote, Moses took the calf that they had made and burned it. He ground it to powder and strewed it upon the water. End quote, in Exodus 32:20 and compared to Deuteronomy 9:21. Cogan notes that Levenstam compared the story of the calf's destruction to a literary model from Ugarit, which describes Anat avenging the god Mot. Quote, with fire you shall burn him, with grinding stone you shall grind him, in the field you shall seed him. End quote. Kimchi takes the scattering of the dust.
Say what George Carlin said. My God has a bigger dick than your God.
Kimchi takes the scattering of the dust over the burial ground of the common people as mocking them, as if saying, "Look at what you were worshipping your entire life."
Yeah, one thing with the religious, no respect for the poor. Possibly charity, but no respect.
I thought the point was that, like, if you put like a sacred object in an in an impure place, like a burial plot,
yeah,
it would make it, would render it like you know, unfit to be ever be used for worshipping again.
Yeah.
So for example, if you take wine and you boil it, it makes it unfit to ever be used in idol worship, and therefore becomes not a problem if people are worried that someone might look at your wine and promise it to some idol. You can just boil the wine; it can never be used for idol worship. That's what some religious people do. They only drink
all their wine.
It's pasteurized, pretty much. If you buy kosher wine in a supermarket, it's pasteurized. They literally think that if someone were to touch the wine, they might be like, "I'm going to use this for Jesus," and therefore they can't drink it.
Oh my!
So if they have unpasteurized wine, and there's someone like if there's like a non-Jewish or non-religious person at the table, they'll like keep the wine inside a paper bag or something so that they so they can't be seen.
I should note that Targum here reads and cast its dust to the graves of the idols.
Oh.
Yeah.
The graves of the idols.
That's a different way to do it.
Yeah. I could check on Dre, but like I'll do it later. Okay, so on verse 7, Hebrew for quarters of the shrine of the male shrine prostitutes is Batei HaKedashim. As noted previously, the term Kadesh has been taken by some to refer to cult prostitution, though this is not widely accepted. The quarters where women did weaving for Asherah refers to a custom in the ancient Near East, where women weaved coverings for sculptures of deities. The reading Batim as the usual houses is difficult, since it doesn't fit the context. Targum, Peshitta, traditionals, and modern commentators suggest reading Batim as a type of garment. Septuagint has Chetiin, or Ketiin.
What?
Ketiin.
Where does it take that from?
I have no fucking idea.
Keti. Oh, maybe it like mixed up both words together.
It's Chettiin.
Okay.
So it's Ketiin, I guess.
Yeah.
Vulgate reads, "The women wove, as it were, little dwellings for the grove."
Oh, right. Like when you like put a little jumper around a tree to like keep it warm.
And maybe they made little fairy houses out of twigs, or made little tents for the, for the wee fae folk.
Okay, so on verses 8 through 9, Sweeney suggested that Josiah's attempt is in keeping with Deuteronomy 18:6-8, which allows Levites from throughout the land to serve in the central sanctuary. Rabiel, however, writes that it is unlikely that a king who wholly follows Yahweh's law would break it by conscripting the removal of the priests to Jerusalem, and by applying it to unorthodox priests. She asks, quote, "Why bring unorthodox priests to the purified Jerusalem altar at the risk of violating it?" End quote. She suggested instead that Josiah removes the priests from the high places, but does not bring them to Jerusalem. They return to their kingship settings, where they eat bread in the midst of their brothers.
And there is certainly in Judges, there's some reference to traveling priests and priests serving an area in various capacities. So,
right. Those they're called Kohen. They're using the same term, but they're not actually working in the temple where they're supposed to be. So they're like, here it seems to be like they've been rendered unfit for service, but they're still because of their
unfit for sacred service. Yeah, they're still allowed the unleavened bread.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's saying specifically they can only have unleavened bread. I think it's saying like the sort of sanctified foods that the priests are allowed to eat. They can also eat.
It's more than just leavened or unleavened bread, because anyone can make unleavened bread, but the sanctified bread, particularly the portion unto the Lord. Because remember, Levi receives no portion among the land, because the Lord is to be their portion, and they are to be sustained on the 10% that the people give to the Lord. Obviously, the priests in the temple are going to make out best of that lot, but they also need to allow the portion of those offerings to the other Levites. Otherwise, you're going to have problems.
Yeah. There's a whole system of like the Levites get this amount, the priests get a different amount, the priests get certain foods as from the
Well, the most ritually sacred that have been sitting out before the Lord on the platters. Like, honestly, I remember it sounds like a bakery, where they have the trays all laid out and your bread on them.
Yeah, the table of imagery. No, what's it called?
But I do love that they can't eat the bread until it has gotten stale while God stares at it. The showbread, yeah.
The table of the showbread.
Okay, so on verse 10, Tophet. Exactly what the Tophet is uncertain. Traditional suggests that Tophet was Molech. Rashi explains that he was named Tophet because the priests would bang on drums to pim so that the father should not hear the groans of the child when he was burned by the pagan image. Yeah,
I don't really trust Rashi to do etymology. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, Hebrew etymology, but not like here is a random place name or a name of someone, and where does it come? Why are they called this? Oh, because this word sounds like this other verb in Hebrew.
So Sweeney writes that Tophet is derived from the Aramaic term tepi or tapia, meaning hearth or fireplace, but it is pointed with the vowels for the Hebrew boshet, shame. Though biblical sources claim that the child sacrifice was carried out at Topheth, as we see in Isaiah 30:33, Jeremiah 7:31 and 32, 19 verses 6, 11 through 14, a view accepted by Cogan and Rabiel, Fritz writes that this is not the case, and this reading is based on a misinterpretation of Punic burial sites.
I mean, the number of times I would wager on something being a misinterpretation is I'm gonna lean heavily on that side of the bet.
I mean, the idea that it's probably like as you said, like an Aramaic word for like an oven kind of makes sense, or furnace or whatever. Like if it is to do with, like here is the place, the Valley of Hinnom, where they would pass people through the fires. It would make sense that like part of the temple or whatever, they would have something to do with, a fire, keeping a fire alive, or a heated thing, a heater of some sort. So
sacred flames, drums and worship, these are all very normal things. I really hope that the thing about the sacrificing children was just them being dramatic about condemning their opponents, because of course. I think it most likely was. I think even like rabbinic commentaries would be like it was more like passing the child between two lines of fire.
Yeah, that's Gersonides, I think.
And like, I mean, some will say this means that they were still like killed from it, but it's like if a priest is walking them through, then like if it wouldn't make sense for it to be so bad that the child would die from it. So
no, you could wave them over the fire. We've all gone like this with a flame.
Trial by fire is done in other places as well. So
God loves children and puppy dogs baked together at 365 degrees.
That is not the meat pie I want.
I thought you were going to say with baked beans, and I was like, I didn't know God was British, but whatever.
Okay, so on Molech, the exact identity of Moloch is unclear. Cogan writes that it is not the same Molech described in 1 Kings 11:7, which is a corruption of Milcom, an Ammonite deity, and suggested that it is a general nickname associated with several deities. In the Bible, Moloch is often associated with child sacrifice, as we see in 17:31 and Jeremiah 32:35. Fritz suggested that Molech is probably a corruption of the Hebrew word for king, melech, and here it might be a cover for the Aramean Assyrian weather god Adad. On verse 11, the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. Although some traditionals, like Rashi, Kara, and Kimchi, explain that those who worship the sun had horses ready in the morning to go out towards the sun, or to go to the area where they bowed to the sun, according to Gersonides and Apovenel, modern commentators take the horses and chariots to be figures of the carriages for the Babylonian Assyrian god Shamash. Sweeney notes that the horse and chariot imagery is used to depict Yahweh in heavens, as we see in Habakkuk 3 and Psalms 18, 68, and 104. He writes that sunrise would be the time for morning service of the temple, and the metaphorical depiction of Yahweh's chariot traversing the heavens functions as a liturgical portrayal of the rising of the sun.
Wait, Yahweh had a chariot across the heavens as well?
He is depicted apparently as such.
I thought that was just Jesus and Helios and Apollo that had that.
I'm sure Lawrence talks about it in his heavenly equestrians or whatever it's called.
Not quite that.
Not the chariot.
No. I mean, I talk about the chariot and the way that I talk about like the ascension scene, right? that we get. But no, the pulling of the sun stuff, I did not get into that in that video.
Interestingly, there are like synagogues from like the 1st, 2nd century CE that have like mosaics, beautiful mosaics of like scenes from the Bible. And it was quite common to have like a zodiac wheel where they would have like the signs of the zodiac, the Hebrew equivalents. I mean, they're mostly the same. They're just Hebrew names, really. And but a lot of times they would have in the center of the wheel a figure of Helios. I think it's interesting that they were like, this is a synagogue. It's a Jewish prayer place, but like Helios is as the god of the sun, the personification of the sun in a non theological sense, I guess. They were okay with. It's just interesting the way that they viewed it.
That sounds more like Hellenized Judaism, not
right. I mean, the mosaics themselves were probably not every single.
I thought Hellenized Judaism was known by another name.
Christianity.
Exactly.
No, that's there are two different things.
Yeah, I think by this. I mean, there are.
Hellenized Judaism had a bastard spawn, and that was Christianity.
I think interestingly enough, the early Christian mosaics that they're found don't have any. They have less like imagery. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like less people and animals, I think.
The amount of tantrums about imagery and bacon caused by the Abrahamic religions.
I mean, there are plenty of images of
animals,
people that like I can think of like a couple caves, especially.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm just saying specifically like the mosaics. But no, maybe it's just what they found. I just remember what I remember seeing. It was like just decorations. It weren't like pictures of stories or anything.
Oh yeah, they were usually just from what I remember, they are usually just decorations. Sure, it's not like references to actual stories for the most part. There are some of those, but not that many.
Oh yeah, some writing, Greek writing, stuff like that.
Okay, on that same verse, the court, in Hebrew, baparvarim, derived from parvar, which is a hapax. Its exact meaning is uncertain, and even Rashi says that he does not know what they are.
I think Steinsaltz thinks that it's something to do with that it's related to. Oh no! It wasn't Steinsaltz. It's Radak. What do you call Radak?
Kimchi.
Kimchi. Yeah, he says like it's actually mentioned somewhere else in like Ezekiel.
Yeah, Ezekiel 27, 28 in the Targum.
Okay.
The Mikra or the fields of
in English it says here the surrounding areas.
Yeah.
So I think that's where JPS gets its translation for like the precincts.
Yeah. So, okay. So Septuagint has Farorim. Of course, because the Bible written in Greek is very based. So Vulgate and Kara take it as a place name. Kimchi, following Targum on Ezekiel 27:28, suggested that Parva refers to city billows. Botseko renders villages. Cogan writes that it is unclear if the word is related to Parvar in Bet, appearing in an Aramaic Lydian bilingual inscription, where it refers to an entrance, neither to the word Parvar with a Bet instead of a Vav in 1 Chronicles 26:18, where it probably refers to a construction next to the temple. Some commentators, like Sweeney, suggested that this was a Persian loanword, referring to a flat area. Thus, if the word is indeed Persian, then its incorporation here indicates a note inserted into Kings during a late post-DH period. Halot renders an annex on the western side of Solomon's temple. Peshita Peruda, probably a corruption of an original Syriac word for roof or upper story. On 12-14, Josiah breaks the altars made by the Judean kings Achaz and Manasseh, and thus, quote, presents Josiah as a righteous king who corrects problems introduced by kings of the past, end quote, according to Sweeney. Such rooftop altars are mentioned in Jeremiah 19:13, 32-29, and Zephaniah 1:5. Solomon built high places outside of Jerusalem for his foreign wives, as we've seen in 1 Kings 11:6-8. The Hill of Corruption, in Hebrew Har HaMashchit, refers to the Mount of Olives, according to Targum, traditionals, and modern commentators, and is generally taken to be a reformulation of Har HaMishcha, which means Mountain of Anointing, as we see in Mishnah Midot 2:4, referring to the idol worshipping that occurred there. Septuagint reads Mount of Mosoath.
Oh. Just another transliteration. Okay.
I guess, yeah. On verses 15 and 16, Josiah continues his cultic purification in the territories of the former kingdom of Israel. Although it has been suggested by Aharoni, Malamat, and Sweeney that Josiah's act indicates that Israel's territory was passed to his rulership, Cogan notes that Egypt filled the governmental void that was created from the Assyrians leaving Israel. Josiah's cultic activity in Samaria would not have interrupted the political arrangement settled between him and Psamtik. Fritz suggested that verse 15 is best seen as the work of a later redactor, who felt he had to mention the destruction of the rival sanctuary set up by Jeroboam, once DH had already condemned it as contradicting Yahweh.
I mean, if from the perspective of after the Assyrian conquest, a lot of the Israelites kind of joined the kingdom of Judah, it's possible that the king might have had more influence in the north at certain points.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
He couldn't have that much influence in the north because there's the ice wall that gets in his way.
Well, not the far north, just the.
I thought that was the south, ring around Antarctica to keep the lizard people from invading the flat earth, right?
Yeah. Okay, on 17 and 18, Raybill comments, despite the rapid, frenzied activity at Bethel, the disinterment is arrested when Josiah's attention is drawn to one particular grave, which he learns belongs to a man of God from Judah. In 1 Kings 13, the Bethel prophet begs interment with this man in acknowledgement that his prophecy was accurate. Josiah would come and destroy Bethel's altar and priests, as in verses 31-34. The narrative pause identifies the two men buried together and the honor Josiah accords the pair. He thus affirms their ministries and acknowledges the inviolability of the prophetic word concerning the altar. On 21 through 23, the demand to offer Passover to Yahweh in Jerusalem is taken by Fritz as modeled on the demand of Deuteronomy 16, 5 and 6. The last reference to a Passover festival is in Joshua 5, 10 and 11, in which Joshua and the people celebrated the Passover at Gilgal before conquering Israel. Rabel notes that the festival in Deuteronomy occurs at a central shrine, which makes Josiah's Passover unique when compared to the local family celebration detailed in Exodus 12:1 through 13:16, and may have been observed during the monarchic era. She notes that while it is claimed that no such Passover was made, quote, during the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, end quote, 2 Chronicles 30:1 through 27 reports that Hezekiah did hold a Passover festival. She writes, quote, this selective recounting emphasizes the uniqueness and completeness of Josiah's reforming actions, end quote.
I mean, it could be read as like, you know, a Passover such as this has not happened. You know, it could be saying like as grand and as united as this.
It's a Passover like nobody's ever seen before.
It's the best Passover. You're never going to see another Passover like this.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what it's saying. It's saying like
nobody knows Passover's better than me.
No.
We only use potato starch here.
That's funny because like if you're like really strict, then potato starch is not good.
Yeah, you can't eat lentils as well. For some like
Ashkenazim don't eat any legumes.
Yeah, legumes and yeah.
So
how
it's like
are they yeast?
No, they're not yeast, but they look like seeds. Don't ask. There are some families that don't eat cucumbers because the seeds of cucumbers look like wheat. See?
I mean, there is a tradition
like
not
a really
to eat.
Minority.
There is tradition not to eat vinegar because in Hebrew it's chometz and it's similar to chametz. So,
So if something looks like a thing that sounds like a thing that might be used with the thing you're not allowed to eat, then you can't eat it.
I think when it comes to Passover, people just enjoy being as strict as possible with themselves.
yeah,
Like literally, like
vinegar, we have to stick with what, Italian?
no, not balsamic or
literally, if you go to like really, really like religious Jewish people,
Are you supposed to have the bitter herbs in vinegar? Isn't that the thing? That's the thing.
salt water? We
salt. Yeah.
literally like there's literally no spices. You're literally having chicken, potato, and meat like every meal. Like no rice, no legumes. Some people hate it. Some people love it.
Mm-hmm.
And also the quality of matzah can vary a lot. So sometimes the only bread you're having for a week tastes like cardboard.
Oh, so it's like the little Jesus crackers that the Catholics have, only bigger.
I mean,
It's like,
it
like a cracker. It's like
it
a big
depends.
cracker.
Yeah, it's a cracker, but it depends on the quality. Good matzah can be delicious, especially if you have a spread on it. Never mind.
It's
Yeah,
never
my family
delicious.
get like this whole meal.
Shut up,
whole meal.
Lawrence.
I'll show
so
you
on
next
verse
time.
25.
It's in
On
a
verse
couple of
20.
weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. On verse 25, no other king gets such praise other than Josiah. Cogan notes that Josiah stands
I
in
was going to say
DH.
Joffrey.
Yeah. Joffrey Chaucer.
Do you not know who Joffrey is?
Joffrey Lannister. Hello. Have you not
Sorry,
even seen
I'm not.
clips of Game of Thrones?
Sorry, I'm not a geek enough.
You should
No,
know
no,
it for the incest references alone.
No, it's okay. I also would not have known a Game of Thrones reference.
Mm-hmm. Though you look
I mean,
the
I
part.
need to hear
So,
Tomer say that he's not a nerd, he's a math geek.
yeah, kinda. Okay, so Cogan notes that Josiah's stance in the age is like that of Moses, which claims that no prophet like him arose after his death in Deuteronomy 34:10. And Hens-Piazza comments, quote, the reported seriousness and adamancy with which Josiah entered into and followed the covenant with all his heart and all his soul in verse 3 is extended here to include all his might in verse 25. The theological assessment at the opening of his reign, reiterated and elaborated here, frames Josiah's career and life in a positive light, as if to wall him off from the fate still hovering over Judah. The uncompromisingly positive portrait intensifies the theological problem lurking in this narrative. Despite Josiah's unmatched fidelity, not even this emblematic kingship, grounded in the renewal of covenant, can derail the horrific threat to the people. 2 Kings 21, 10-15.
You gotta love these good kings, whether it's Hezekiah or Josiah. Oh no, we've angered the Lord. We have to, I'll still kill everybody, but not while you're around. Just the next generation, I'll put it off. Oh, that's such a relief. Like, it's fine if my people are slaughtered as long as I'm gone by then.
Rimmer's Braggeries is to Tomer and Isaac. So Jews don't comb their hair because penis and peen comb sound similar in Spanish?
No.
Well, they're not Christian, so they like
They don't worry about Spanish. Oh,
they
good.
like suffering.
They like penis.
They are masochists. What
if
are
they
you
want to,
talking
they can
about?
comb their hair with a penis.
That's not really the best tool for the job, but it's which one is the one that's obsessed with suffering, the Jews or the Christians? I'm pretty sure that's just guilt in different fonts.
So far as I know, that's the Christians.
That's a kink. Sorry.
Yeah, well, the Christians are the ones who wrote the OG torture porn anthology of Fox's Book of Martyrs and have lovely statues of their martyrs holding their flayed skin like a suit over their arm.
That's just a Tuesday.
Yes.
I mean, the statue was very well made. I think that probably took a little more time, but yeah, generally speaking, okay.
So on 20,
just get into fetish, we would all be in a better world.
I guess. So on 29, Pharaoh Necho. I skipped one. 26 and 27, Fritz comments. Despite the king's penitence, however, and his return to Yahweh, the will of God remains set on the destruction of Judah. The reason is seen in the sin of Manasseh. To the rejection of his will, quote, Yahweh answered with the destruction of Judah, the rejection of Jerusalem, the chosen city, and of the place which was to be the house of his name, end quote, according to Wuthwine. Not even Josiah in his reform could turn away the decreed fate of Judah and the destruction of the Davidic kingship.
Yeah, I found it interesting that it decided to put that in straight away. So it was like, here is all the things that he did, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, this was not good enough. God still was like, I'm just going to destroy them. But they could have easily have been like, because the next two kings were evil, apparently, or three, whatever. Then, what Josiah did wasn't, they kind of undid it. So they could have just blamed, they could have made God look a bit less petty. You know what I mean?
God is a petty bitch is kind of his vibe, though. There have been so many instances where God is a vindictive petty bitch in this narrative.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, the writers.
But I get it. I mean, even if it was just a case of they didn't burn the idol worshipping priests like Josiah did.
Yeah.
Maybe just because Josiah had already genocided them all, like a good godly king does.
Yeah, it's interesting. They didn't take the cop out and be like, oh, all the Jehoahaz and Jehoahaz and Jehoiakin and Jehoiachin, whatever their names are, they were evil, and therefore, that's why they were taken into exile, and that's why the temple was destroyed. So they're like, no, it's because of Manasseh. Manasseh was the bad guy, and even Josiah couldn't undo what Manasseh had done.
Did I miss something? Because in all of that, the book just said Manasseh was a bad guy, and we were supposed to be impressed by that. I didn't really hear a whole lot of the story.
There was one case he's supposed to have sacrificed one of his sons, so that is actually bad. The rest of it was just maybe
It says that
let
he
people
filled
worship.
the city.
Yeah,
And he says that he
yeah,
filled
that
the city with the blood of the innocent, sort of thing. Like,
Well, yeah, that he started to like take people to where he started worshiping other gods, and
he
built
set up
other
images
altars
in the temple
Yeah.
and blah blah blah.
And he did augury and magic and all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, it just seems like the Star Wars prequels to me.
No
I
Jar
guess.
Jar, but
There needed to be a lot more story there. I think I've said this on this show before, that the transition from Walter White to Heisenberg was brilliant, but the transition from Anakin to Darth sucked ass.
and it could have been a Heisenberg. It could have.
Yeah, I watched episode 1, so I guess that's the first of the prequels. Yeah, that movie sucked. I'd never watched another Star Wars movie.
That's because
I
you
watched it
start
in
with
theaters
episode
with my
4.
dad.
That doesn't
I
make any
watched it
sense.
in theaters when it
Because it
came
was
out
made
with my
fast.
dad, because my dad watched the original Star Wars in theaters. The New Hope episode, the OG. He watched it in theaters like 20 times minimum.
I know that I made it more than 70 times in theaters.
Nice.
1977.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, the original still holds up. There's the prequels are whatever. The sequel series, I don't think I even watched the last one. They're not great. But the some of these spin-offs are pretty good, like
The
Mandalorian
Mandalorian.
and Andor
Oh.
as well, apparently.
Yeah,
I haven't
but
seen it.
like Lawrence said, I saw episode 1 once.
Yeah.
I saw episode 2 and 3 once each.
Just so you know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, moving on. On verse 29.
Yeah, quit holding up the show, Tomer.
Yeah, all my fault. Pharaoh Necho. This is Necho II, who ruled Egypt in 610 through 595 BCE. Targum and Peshitta call him Pharaoh the Lame, reading Necho as crippled or lame, i.e. Neche, a reading favored by Kimchi.
Which is so stupid. It's like, oh, you know what? This guy wasn't a historical figure. We didn't use a real person's name. We just made up a name, which makes sense in Hebrew. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
Necho II is mentioned by some of the writings by Ashurbanipal.
Mhm.
The King Josiah, Yoshiao, we don't really have anything about him, but we do have possibly some bulle that mention Hilkiah, the high priest, which actually was last week. He was introduced, but he's also mentioned as the father of Azariah, which I don't think that's another character. It's just the bulle mentions him as by that name.
Okay, so Camille Guerin in EBR Online Necho writes that he is mainly known for having carried out great projects, such as the digging of a canal linking the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. While his military interventions are attested in the Bible, Herodotus and Josephus, no Egyptian document gives this kind of information. Fritz notes 2 goals that Necho followed when marching towards the Euphrates: the assumption of power in the former Assyrian provinces, and the support of the last Assyrian king against the Babylonians. Rabiel notes that while the Masoretic text reads that Necho went up against Assyria, al, the historical record shows that Egypt and Assyria allied against Babylon, and thus the Masoretic text is amended to read went up to, el.
Okay, apparently what you said about the canal, he initiated but never completed, and more or less a Suez Canal long before the Suez Canal. But he did apparently go to the Phoenicians from the Red Sea by going around Africa, though, which is very, very impressive. If that actually happened, but I think it's from Herodotus as well. So
yeah, I mean, Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? Why would you, if you were an Egyptian king, why would you want to go from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean around Africa? Why wouldn't you just go by land along the river? You know, if you have to, you could just carry the ship from the Red Sea to the Nile or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it made sense.
Yeah.
Apparently it took them
Okay.
3 years.
Yeah. Okay, so on King Josiah marched out to meet him in battle. Hebrew Bible reads, "And Josiah the king went to meet him." It is unclear if Josiah fought against Necho or against the Assyrians. The usual understanding is that Josiah fought against Egypt. Kara and Kimchi, based on Talmud Ta'anit 22b, wrote that Josiah wished to follow the commandment, "And no sword shall pass in your land," Leviticus 26:6, even if it was a sword of peace, quote unquote. Guerin writes that Josiah, who wanted political and religious independence, might have opposed Necho, who had responded to the Assyrian king Assur-uballit. Cogan, however, writes that in those days, Necho ruled the territory of Israel, and Josiah's status was inferior to Necho, probably being a vassal to him, and so he was invited to stand before Necho to explain his suspicious behavior. He writes that this interpretation in 2 Chronicles 35:20-24, that Josiah fought against Necho and was shot by an arrow and was killed, does not match verse 29, which doesn't indicate any battle or other military campaign. Thus, he writes that what happened in Megiddo was more of a military tribunal than a battle. He further writes, quote, "No doubt that Josiah's unexpected death was seen as a great disaster among his contemporaries. According to a late tradition, quote, Jeremiah composed laments for Josiah, with which all the singers, male and female, recited in their laments for Josiah, as is done to this day. They became customary in Israel and were incorporated into the laments." End quote. 2 Chronicles 35:25, and compare Josephus in Antiquities 1078. Similarly, it seems that the late D.H. struggled to understand the death of the history's hero, a righteous king, the most important king since David. It is even more surprising that he did not add an explanation to the events at Megiddo, and it is clear that Josiah's death did not fit his worldview regarding divine retribution. Moreover, his death contradicts Hulda's promise, quote, "I will gather you to your fathers, and you will be laid in your tomb in peace," end quote, in 2220. 200 years later, the chronicler blamed Josiah himself for his death, since he, quote, "did not heed Necho's words from the mouth of God," end quote, in 2 Chronicles 35:22. And much later, that it was Josiah's ignorance from Jeremiah's warning that brought to his end, in 1 Ezra 1:26. However, these two rationalizations did not manage to hide the crisis which the author of Kings and his generation experienced with the king's death.
So once again, it's your fault if God doesn't keep his promises to you.
Yeah. On 31, Yehoachaz. He is also called Shallum in 1 Chronicles 3:15 and Jeremiah 22:11. Modern commentators take Shallum to be his real name and Yehoachaz being a throne name, meaning Yahweh has seized. According to the chronicler, he was Josiah's fourth son. Though Cogan notes Tulsina's opinion that the name change reflects the new spirit in Judah due to Josiah's reform, he writes that this does not confer with the list of names during the late First Temple period, with the percentage of the Yahwistic quote-unquote names before the reform being similar to after it.
Yeah, the king Ahaz, which is considered one of the more evil ones, I think.
Yehoachaz.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah, he's called Ahaz most of the time in the Bible, the father of Hezekiah.
No, that's a different person.
Yeah, I'm saying that the king Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah, I think he's almost always called Ahaz, but I think there's one place where he's called Yehoachaz. So
I mean, I
vaguely remember that. We went over that because it did like we were reading the story and it just changed a different name, and then it said in like the comments that he was sometimes called that.
Yeah. No, I think you're thinking of his grandfather Uzziah, who is also called Uzziyahu.
No,
That's
I'm
the
not
one that actually switches between the names. 'Cause I don't think Ahaz. I think it's only in one place in Chronicles, maybe, where he's called Yehoahaz. I don't think he's. I think literally everywhere else is called. He's just called Ahaz. Let me check now.
I mean, Isaiah's mayor in EBR Online, Yohachaz, writes that some argue that the name is usually spelled Achaziah, which reverses the two elements of the name, like Klein.
I mean, it's definitely. I mean, it mentions here like an abbreviation of Yehoahaz, the second. Blah blah blah. The 12th king, son and successor of Jotam, 20, portrayed as evil in Kings. It doesn't really say where he's called Yehoahaz though.
I'm looking back at a few things, so maybe I'll find it.
I don't think he is called Achaz. Okay, so.
No, I'm not saying. No, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that the current Yehoahaz is called Achaz. I'm saying that Achaz.
Oh.
The previous king, his real name was actually Yehoahaz.
Oh, okay.
And he was.
Yeah. It's a theophoric shortening. I mean, it is found in Tiglath-Pileser's inscription Iyauchazi.
That's it.
So yes. Okay.
I think that's right.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, I was confused there. Okay, so on 33, Sweeney notes that Ribla, located in the Lebanese Bekaa Valley, about 7 miles south of Kadesh, on the Orontes River, offered a strategic position for the Egyptians to threaten the south and secure himself from any Babylonian threat to the north. He writes that the amount of the indemnity is modest when compared to the 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold imposed on Hezekiah in 1814. But Judah at this time would have been far smaller. The figure for the talents of gold is different in the Lusanic Recension and Peshitta, which reads 10 talents, and Septuagint, which reads 100 talents, though the Masoretic text reading is preserved in Vulgate, Targum, and Josephus in Antiquities 1082. On verse 34, Yehoiakim. Kimchi comments, the reason for his name change, so that Yehoiakim may see that he is under Necho's charge, and his kingship is from him, for even his name is from him. End quote. Rebiel notes that the name change is a common demonstration of an overlord's authority, and Eliakim, God establishes, becomes Yehoiakim, Yahweh establishes. She writes that the change may signal a concession to a pro-Yahwistic party, possibly among the same people of the land who elected Josiah's anti-Egyptian son. Cogan notes that when Ashurbanipal appoints Psamtik I, Necho's father, as governor of Egypt on his behalf, he received the Assyrian name Nabu-Shezibani.
Interesting choice.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that the person who is writing this at least didn't seem to think that this was a regnal name, because otherwise they would have written about the other kings, what their names were and what their regnal name was, rather than being like, no, Pharaoh changed his name. Because if it's just like, oh, this is his royal name, it doesn't make any sense. At least maybe that is what the true story, but the person who wrote this didn't seem to know that.
Okay, on verse 35, Yehoiakim paid Pharaoh Necho the silver and gold he demanded. Hens-Piazza comments, 3 times the narrative highlights this obligation. Yehoiakim gave the silver and gold to Pharaoh, to meet Pharaoh's demand for money, to give it to Pharaoh in verse 35. The repetitive rhetoric underlines the shift in Judah's status. It has become a vassal state under Egyptian suzerainty. Moreover, the citizens bear the weight of the burden of tribute. Yehoiakim exacts the silver and the gold from the people. As the account hurls towards the finish line, it is laced with irony. This move toward the end of Judah's existence is not just the conclusion of its status as a nation-state, it is the beginning of the end, where salvation history itself will seem to be reversed. Egypt, the place where, according to tradition, Israel was once liberated, asserts its power and imposes its burden upon the people again.
As always.
And finally, on 36, Jehoiakim's age and duration of rule seems to suggest that Josiah was 14 years old when Jehoiakim was born, which Cogan takes as too young, quote-unquote. He suggests that the number 25 is a corruption and probably should read 23 or 24. Jehoiakim's mother is said to be from Ruma, generally identified as Tel Eruman, in the upper Jordan Valley. Fritz notes that it is mentioned along with Merom in the annals of Tiglath-Pileser III. If this is the case, this may suggest Josiah's connection with some parts which belong to the kingdom of Israel.
Well, actually, if he was 25 years old when he became king, and his brother Ahaz was 23, and he only reigned for a few months, that would imply that Ahaz was younger than Jehoiakim. So, yeah, as you said, maybe it's a corruption, and he was a younger son. Otherwise, it might be that he actually was a younger son that they liked him better, so they made him king, which could be the reason why it mentions that he's anointed. Because apparently, you don't need to anoint someone if their father is king.
I mean,
or if he's like the first in line, I guess.
Yeah, but still, there's still the ceremony. The anointing is part of the whole becoming king.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not always mentioned, that that the king is anointed just as he became king at the age of blah blah blah. But with this one, it could be because they made him king. They chose him after the father was killed in battle. So that's why it says they anointed him. Or it could be a reference to this idea that he was a younger brother, so they had to anoint him to make him king instead of his brother, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, I only have one, which is Ishodad, who said that by abolishing all human sacrifices, Josiah abolished every form of the cult of the devil and the demons.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been so prevalent up to now.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that all of these foreign gods or whatever, I mean not foreign, but other gods are actually demons is an interesting take. It's well, if you read the text, it seems to imply that they actually have some sort of power. So
yeah, well, that was Augustine. That was his big thing, is that all the other gods exist. They're just demons because they have power, because we have to accept all the supernatural. Same reason that Christians in the 70s decided that aliens were actually demons, because if you have supernatural claims that are made and their evidence is no better than your evidence, and people point it out, then you kind of have to at least accept hypothetically those claims, but then you just discount them because it's all demons. It's just demons.
Yeah. So what really is the difference between monotheism and polytheism? It's just we just like this one better. I feel like a lot of polytheists seems to have one super god, and then all the other gods are much lower.
Well, the thing is, it always depends on not always, but it depends a lot on where you are, what time period, what you're celebrating, stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Fair.
Are we ready to move on to 24?
Yes, and I don't know if Aaron wants to read the last chapter, so maybe Lilith should read it, 24?
I would love to, but I have to duck out in about 5 minutes for that appointment that I let you guys know about. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I love you. I'd never normally leave early.
It's only 20 verses.
I know, but literally I have to leave in 5 minutes because there's construction I have to drive around.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mind doing a chapter. So, Aaron, do you want to do this one or the next one? It's up to you.
I'll do this one.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay, so in his days, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up. Jehoiakim became his servant for 3 years, then turned and rebelled against him. He sent against him bands of the Chaldeans, bands of the Arameans, bands of the Moabites, and bands of the Ammonites, and he sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by his servants, the prophets. Surely this came upon Judah at the command of the Lord to remove them out of his sight for the sins of Manasseh, for all that he had committed, and also for the innocent blood that he had shed, for he filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord was not willing to pardon. Now the rest of the deeds of Jehoiakim and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? So Jehoiakim slept with his ancestors. Then his son Jehoiakim succeeded it. Is it just pronounced differently, isn't it?
Yes, Jehoiakim instead of Jehoiakim.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Jehoiakim.
And Chaf and Kuf in Hebrew.
Yeah, well. I mean, if you could, then the ch would be ch. But
yeah, Jehoiachin.
Jehoiachin. Okay.
But that's fine. Yeah, you could just say Jehoiakim. Yeah.
The king of Egypt did not come again out of his land, for the king of Babylon had taken over all that belonged to the king of Egypt, from the Wadi of Egypt to the river Euphrates. Jehoiakim was 18 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Nehushta, daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. He did what is evil in the sight of the Lord, just as his father had done. At that time, the servants of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up to Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to the city while his servants were besieging it. King Jehoiakim of Judah gave himself up to the king of Babylon, himself, his mother, his servants, his officers, and his palace officials. The king of Babylon took him prisoner in the 8th year of his reign. He carried off all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He cut in pieces all the vessels of gold in the temple of the Lord that the king of Solomon of Israel had made. All this was as the Lord foretold. He carried away all Jerusalem, all the officials, all the warriors, 10,000 captives, all the artisans and the smiths. No one remained except the poorest people of the land. He carried away Jehoiachin to Babylon, the king's mother, the king's wives, his officials, and the elite of the land he took into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon. The king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon all the men of valor, 7,000, the artisans and the smiths, 1,000, all of them strong and fit for war. The king of Babylon made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah.
Damn.
Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. Indeed, Jerusalem and Judah so angered the Lord that he expelled them from his presence. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon.
Love you. I'm leaving now.
See, you could have read that.
I'm sorry. You're right. Bad me. I would have had to speed read, but I really do have to go. Just, make a note of any of the really more gruesome decapitations for me. And remember, always drink for blood magic. Okay?
Okay.
Mwah. See you on the Discord.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
All right. So, this section, the Babylonian captivity or the Babylonian exile, that one's pretty well attested in other sources. So this is not like a controversial thing. The thing that happened with the Assyrians coming in Israel, and also the Babylonians coming into Judah, they would establish the place as a vassal, and that means that the kings of the area would have to give them money to basically just not kill them. Very mafia bossy. the right the name change. This was a common practice. This was a way to exert power and authority over people. You change their name, and it kind of basically said, "I'm your who's your daddy," shit like that. That was the kind of the purpose of the name change. We've seen a few name changes already in the Bible, but for the Bible at least, they've usually come from God. This is a practice that kings did all the time if they took place over. It's very common.
Yeah. So I'll start. I see a comment. If Aaron wants to read it.
Yeah, I'll do the comment. John Fapiano said, "Ask Aaron what species of snake he's holding for me, please. The pics are too small, and I'm more interested in snakes than religion." This is an Argentine boa, and I named her Nebulosa. Okay, we can continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a question. The last king that's mentioned, right? We all seem to be reading it
Zedekiah?
as. Oh, sorry, not Zedekiah. The last,
Jehoiachin?
right? Yeah. The Jehoiachin, right?
Yeah.
So apparently he's also known as like Yechaniah or in Jeconiah, I guess
Yeah,
in
yes.
English.
Jehoiachin.
Is that what he's called in like Chronicles or something? Like
He is called he's called that in Jeremiah. Jeremiah. Yeah, it's called Yechoniah in Jeremiah 24:1, Yechoniah in Jeremiah 28:4, Yechoniah in Jeremiah 27:20 Ketiv, Koniah or Chaniah in 22:24, and in Ezekiel he says Yoyachin.
But his frat mates called him Skippy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So is it possible that Jeremiah was like maybe about a fictional king and they just assigned it to this guy, or does it make sense that this is the same person? Because to take the Jehoiachin and Yechoniah is pretty much like they're backwards, right? Is it technically just the same name, or is it?
It's maybe like I can wait a second.
Is it because the way it's pronounced it sounds similar? Like they both begin with Ya. Yeho,
I mean, it
meaning
could be.
Jawa, and Yachin meaning what is it? What does it mean to establish? So Yachin means to whatever. It just means like, Yahweh, Yah has established.
Does
I guess. I mean,
Zedekiah mean Yahweh is righteous?
Yes.
I got it.
Good on you, Lawrence. You know how to speak Hebrew now.
Yeah, Sidkiyahu in Hebrew. Sidkiyahu.
Yeah.
Oh, Sidkiyahu.
No, it seems like in inscriptions from like the 13th year of Nebuchadnezzar, from at least what Cogan says, it is Yehoiachin, Yaukin, or Yakin.
Right. Yakin, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Jeremiah is maybe just written like by they knew who they were talking about, they just misspelled it.
I have no idea. Maybe it's like,
Okay.
Okay.
I was wondering, or maybe they changed the name on purpose not to get people upset. I don't know. Oops.
Maybe it's
Interesting.
Got another comment from Rimmers Bregerai. Says, Lawrence, princes changing names when crowned was reasonably common both in Roman and in post-Roman European monarchies too. And sometimes princes would change their name to a symbol nobody could pronounce.
oh, come on.
If I don't know that much about post-Roman European monarchies, but when it comes to the Romans, didn't those guys usually just like adopt names themselves? Because this is like a given name. He's being given a new name.
Right, but I'm thinking it's very possible that this was a tradition that was done before, right? Like I'm almost sure the Egyptian pharaohs were had regnal names.
Yeah, and then they
Right.
had their real names, which only
Yeah.
them and their
They
mother knew.
knew. Yeah. So it's very possible that, like, the Judahites, Israelites also had some sort of system of, multiple names per person, but at least the people who are writing this seem to imply that everyone has one name, but there seems to be a lot of hints in the text that they've got more than one name. And here's an example, right, with Yechonia and Yehoiachin. Maybe Yechonia is just a regular name for a person, but like when you become a king, you want to have a Yehoiachin, Yeho something. It seems to be almost a tradition in the Davidic line. I mean, Josiah, for example, is Yoshiyahu, like God saves or redeems, God establishes, God keeps. Chizkiyahu. Okay, that's slightly different. Putting Yahoo at the end, I guess, is also okay, but maybe I don't know. I don't know if there's a certain pattern to what is a regular name, what's a regular name, but it seems to be that there might be more than one name per person. So it could be that the person who wrote this didn't really know this was a thing, and they were like, "Oh, there's two names for this guy." Probably the guy who made him king gave him the king name. Maybe. Hard to know. All
right. Okay. So I'll start with on verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar. Cogan notes that Nebuchadnezzar was the son of Nabopolassar, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, who inherited his kingdom when his father died in 605. He is also called Nebuchadrezzar in Jeremiah in 21 verses 2 and 7 and 22-25, and Ezekiel in 26:7 and 29:18 and 19, and is more closer to the original Babylonian Nabu Kuduri Usur, meaning "Oh Nabu protect." Sorry,
I think it's like Usur, like
Usur. Yeah, said Usur.
Okay, I mean, I think it's not a regular S, but yeah.
I mean, maybe meaning "Oh Nabu protect my descendants." And Fritz comments, after Nebuchadnezzar succeeded to the throne in 605, he advanced on Ashkelon in 604 to establish his rule over Syria and Palestine more firmly. The Neo-Babylonian Empire had become heir to the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The attempted defeat of Egypt in 601 appears to have failed. Nebuchadnezzar did not lead a campaign in 600, which left it to the Aramean and East Jordanian vassals to fight against disloyal Judah. Jehoiakim's fall from Babylon is thus best dated to the year 601. The Babylonian king finally marched on Jerusalem in 598, when he besieged and sacked the city and installed a new king, reported in detail in 24:10-17.
Jehoiachin is also mentioned in Nebuchadnezzar's record somewhere.
Yeah. I mentioned that previously.
Yeah.
Okay, on verses 2-4, Sweeney comments, the account presents Nebuchadnezzar's harassment and invasion of Judah as an act of Yahweh prompted by the sins of Manasseh, as we see in 21:10-15, 23, 26, and 27. Such an explanation is an example of theodicy, in which the exilic DH defends Yahweh's righteousness and power by claiming that Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed on account of Manasseh's sins rather than Yahweh's negligence or importance. This view is in keeping with the Deuteronomistic view of covenant, in which human beings have the responsibility to observe Yahweh's will in return for Yahweh's assurances of well-being in the land. Such a contention creates tremendous theological difficulties insofar as it attempts to explain disaster by claiming that victims of disaster must have sinned. On verse 6, Jehoiakim rested with his ancestors. There is no mention of Jehoiakim's burial here, though the Lusanic Recension and Septuagint on 2 Chronicles 36:8 add that he was buried in the garden of Uzzah. Rashi and Kara explain that Jehoiakim did not die in his bed, for Nebuchadnezzar bound him with chains to take him to Babylon, as we see in 2 Chronicles 36:6, and when they were dragging him, he died by their hands, and thus fulfilling Jeremiah 22:19, with the burial of a donkey he will be buried and dragged and thrown. Josephus, Josephus in Antiquities 1097 wrote that Jehoiakim was killed by Nebuchadnezzar, who commanded to throw him unburied in front of the walls. Rabel notes that 2 Chronicles 36, 6 and 7, and Daniel 1, 1 through 7 indicate that Jehoiakim was alive through Jerusalem's fall, which contradicts Kings, since it states that Jehoiakim's 3-month rule took place after his father's death, and before Jerusalem fell. She suggested that there was a co-regency during the final 3 months before Jerusalem's fall. She also suggested that his non-burial may be a textual omission, as already noted. Jeremiah's word could be, quote, a rhetorical denigration of a hated king, end quote. On verse 7, Cogan writes that this verse is removed from its context. Chronologically speaking, the information in it belongs to the period described in verse 1 and explains Jehoiakim's surrender to Babylon. However, it has no syntactical connection to verse 1. He suggests that it was taken from a different line in a source that was before DH. Fritz writes that this verse adds a further comment on the changed balance of power. Quote, the Babylonian king Nabopolassar succeeded in stabilizing Babylonia's position after the fall of Nineveh in 612. When the Egyptians were finally defeated in the Battle of Chalchemish in 605, Babylonia firmly established its supremacy. Nebuchadnezzar, crown prince of Babylon and leader of its army, advanced as far as Hamath on the Orontes River in the same year, and thus removed the Egyptians entirely from Syro-Palestine. It is unclear why Jehoiakim became a vassal of Babylon and when he withdrew again. End quote. On verse 8, Jehoiachin. He is also called Yechoniah in Jeremiah 24:1, Yechoniah in 28:4, Yechoniah in 27:20, Ketiv, Kaniah or Koniah in 22:24, and Yoachin in Ezekiel 1:2. Cogan notes that there are records of his name in cuneiform from the 13th year of Nebuchadnezzar, 592 BCE, where Jehoiachin, Iyaukin, and 5 of his sons received meals from the Babylonian king. Jeconiah was 18 years old when he became king. According to 2 Chronicles 36:9, he was 8 years old when he became king. Kimchi suggested that Jehoiakim throned him in the first year that he ruled, so that Jeconiah would rule after his death, because he might have had other sons. Thus, Jeconiah was 8 years old when his father throned him, and when he died, he was 18 years old. Sweeney notes Ezekiel's elegy for Jeconiah in Ezekiel 19:5-9, which suggests that he was older than 8. On Nehushta, daughter of Elnathan, she was from Jerusalem. Several commentators take Elnathan to be a high court official mentioned in Jeremiah 26:22, 36 verses 12 and 25, who sent to recover the prophet Uriah and protested Jehoiakim's burning of Jeremiah's scroll. Thus, Nehushta came from a privileged family. Cogan notes that Lachish letter 3 reports that Koniah, son of Elnathan, the commander of the army, went down to Egypt under the king's mission. He asks if this Koniah was the same one who was sent to Egypt to bring Uriah ben Shemaiah the prophet, as we see in Jeremiah 26:22. On 10-13, the campaign described here is verified in the Babylonian Chronicle, Anet 564, quote, Year 7, month Kislimu, the king of Akkad moved his army into Chati land, laid siege to the city of Judah, or Ya'ahudu, and the king took the city on the 2nd day of the month Adaru. He appointed in it a new king of his liking, took heavy booty from it, and brought it into Babylon. End quote. This account, as well as in Jeremiah 52:28, comes in contrast with the present text, which states that Jeconiah surrendered in Nebuchadnezzar's 8th year, 597. Rabel writes that this discrepancy is explained by the different systems used in Judah and Babylon for calculating regnal years. And she further writes, quote, Two symbols of Jerusalemite freedom and power are depicted as brought under Babylonian control. The ruling family is taken captive in verse 12, and the place and temple are plundered in verse 13. Although the vessels of gold that Solomon, king of Israel, had made are cited among the treasures, this is most probably a rhetorical flourish showing the plunder's significance. While it is not impossible that some of these items survived, it is unlikely given the numerous times the temple riches have been taken. This is the next to last notice of temple treasuries lost in 25:13-17, and is one of the string of similar events that have all shed negative light upon a king's rule, as we've seen 1 Kings 14:26, 15:18, 2 Kings 14:14, 16:8, and 18:15 and 16. Now the plunder is affected by Nebuchadnezzar and fulfills what Yahweh had spoken, quote-unquote. The reference is to 2017 and is part of the disaster forecast against the temple in 1 Kings 9:8. Nebuchadnezzar will complete the destruction of the temple within 11 years.
I also think this is... So I've noted this before, how after a certain point, we don't really hear about the Ark of the Covenant anymore. I think that this is the point at which it's stolen or destroyed or melted into just its gold or something like that. I don't know the technical term for it, but yeah, this is what I think finally happens to the Ark. I think no matter what it was, it also had a shit ton of gold, so it was part of the stuff that was carried off, or part of the stuff that was destroyed and cut into pieces. Whichever one, I think that's what happened to it. So I know that the Ethiopian church currently says that they have it, but they haven't showed it to anyone. And no one else has it, and Ron Wyatt has not found it. So this is what I think happens to it ultimately.
I like you dropping Ron Wyatt in there. Thanks.
Yeah, because he's a fucking bozo. This cat will not leave me the fuck alone. Can you do something else, please? I don't know if he can do something else.
You bought it, you pay the price.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, on 14-16, Sweeney notes that the number of exiles, 10,000 and 7,000 officers and 1,000 artisans, conflicts with the 3,023 mentioned in Jeremiah 52:28. He writes that both texts point to relatively large numbers of the leading people of Jerusalem, and perhaps Judah. He notes that Jeremiah mentions only 832 deportees in 587 BCE, and 745 in 582 BCE, with Jeconiah's deportation constituting the bulk of the Babylonian exile. Thus, quote, the lower numbers for the later figures indicate that the Babylonians had already exiled key figures, and were more intent on killing off the resistance of the rule than in negotiating surrender, end quote. On verse 17 about Mattaniah or Zedekiah. Mattaniah was the last son of Josiah and was Jehoahaz's brother from the same mother. The name change reflects Mattaniah's vassal status. Chazal in Talmud Horayot 11b explained the name change as meaning, may God, Yah, justify, yatzdik, the judgment upon you if you rebel against me. Yeah. And finally, on 18-20, Fritz comments, Zedekiah, who was installed by Nebuchadnezzar as a vassal king, was a younger son of Josiah, not mentioned in 1 Chronicles 3:15. He and his predecessor Jehoahaz had the same mother, and he became the last king on the throne of David. The kingship in Judah comes to an end with him. After a new act of disobedience by the Judean ruler, Nebuchadnezzar abolishes the vassal kingship, turns Judah into a province, and installs a governor instead. The negative judgment of Zedekiah is complemented in verse 20a by another mention of the wrath of Yahweh as the reason for the destruction of Judah and the temple at Jerusalem. From 24:20b, there follows a detailed account of the siege of Jerusalem and the fate of the king. Now I have only two Christians. Cajun wrote that it is more difficult to escape from the domination of vainglory than from that of lust, as is demonstrated by the case of Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah.
Okay.
And Ambrose wrote that it is much better that the priests melt the holy vessels of gold for the sustenance of the poor if a sacrilegious enemy threatens to carry them off and defile them. Yeah.
Isn't it better for them to do that anyway, regardless?
I guess.
Like, no, apparently not. I mean, the gold vessels are needed by the priests.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so we ready to move on to the next one and finish Kings?
Yes. So
Yeah.
I think it. Yeah, Isaac
Somebody
should
in
do
the
it.
chat said that snakes smell. Well, they can. Mine typically do not.
They
All right.
usually smell after they've crawled on an Arn for a bit.
Okay. Will you stop? Okay.
Toma, before you said like the months, right? Was that regarding this campaign now, or this is what happened before?
What are you talking about?
So before you were saying like, you know, with Nebuchadnezzar, I guess you were reading like an inscription or something, and it mentioned
Yeah.
in this month, in this month.
Yeah.
It's like Kislev and Adar. They're like,
It's let me just check. It's
like the beginning of that. That's kind of,
Kislimu.
yeah, which is most probably Kislev.
Kislev, yeah.
And Adar, which is Adar, which
Adar,
is, so
Adar,
that's,
yeah.
we're in Adar now, and
Yes.
Kislev would have been like 2 months ago. But so that would have been like month number, I think Adar is 6, and so over here it seems that the next chapter we're gonna talk it says the 10th month, which it says which is most probably Teves. Actually, no, yeah, maybe the numbers I'm getting are mixed up because the number 1 is Nisan, not Tishrei. Whatever. So could be like, this is like years later, right? What we're gonna read. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, don't worry about it. Okay, should I start?
Yes.
Okay. And in the 9th year of his reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, or Nebuchadnezzar, moved against Jerusalem with his whole army. He besieged it, and they built towers against it all around. The city continued in a state of siege until the 11th year of King Sidkiyahu. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine had become acute in the city. There was no food left for the common people. Then the wall of the city was breached. All the soldiers left the city by night through the gate between the double walls, which is near the king's garden. The Chaldeans were all around the city, and the king set out for the Arabah. But the Chaldean troops pursued the king, and they overtook him in the steps of Jericho as his entire force left him and scattered. They captured the king and brought him before the king of Babylon at Riblah, and they put him on trial. They slaughtered Sidkiyahu's son before his eyes. Then Sidkiyahu's eyes were put out. He was chained in bronze fetters, and he was brought to Babylon. On the 7th day of the 5th month, that was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the chief of the guards, an officer of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of God, the king's palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He burnt down the house of every notable person. The entire Chaldean force that was with the chief of the guard tore down the walls of Jerusalem on every side. The remnant of the people that was left in the city, the defectors who had gone over to the king of Babylon, and the remnant of the population were taken into exile by Nebuzaradan, the chief of the guards. But some of the poorest in the land were left by the chief of the guards to be vine dressers and field hands. The Chaldeans broke up the bronze columns of the house of God, the stands, and the bronze tank that was in the house of God, and they carried the bronze away to Babylon. They also took all the pails, scrapers, snuffers, ladles, and all the other bronze vessels used in the service. The chief of the guards took whatever was of gold and whatever was of silver. fire pans, and sprinkling bowls. The 2 columns, the 1 tank, and the stands that Solomon provided for the house of God, all these objects contained bronze beyond weighing. The 1 column was 18 cubits high. It had a bronze capital above it. The height of the capital was 3 cubits, and there was a meshwork with pomegranates about the capital, all made of bronze. And the like was true of the other column with its meshwork. The chief of the guards also took Seraiah, the chief priest, Zephaniah, the deputy priest, and the 3 guardians of the threshold. And from the city he took a eunuch who was in command of the soldiers, 5 of the royal privy councillors who were present in the city, the scribe of the army commander who was in charge of mustering the people of the land, and 60 of the common people who were inside the city. Nebuchadnezzar, the chief of the guards, took them and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. The king of Babylon had them struck down and put to death at Riblah in the region of Hamath. Thus Judah was exiled from its land. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon put Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, son of Shaphan, in charge of the people whom he left in the land of Judah. When the officers of the troops and their men heard that the king of Babylon had put Gedaliah in charge, they came to Gedaliah at Mitzpah with Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, Yochanan, son of Kareah, Seraiah, son of Tanchumeth, and Netophathites?
The Netophathite. Yes,
and the Netophathites.
No,
sorry.
is the Netophathite.
Seraiah, son of Tanchumeth, the Netophathites. And Yaazanyahu, son of Ma'achat, together with son of the Ma'achite, together with their men. Gedaliah reassured them and their men, saying, "Do not be afraid of the servants of the Chaldeans. Stay in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and it will go well with you." In the 7th month, Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, son of Elishama, who was of royal descent, came with 10 men, and they struck down Gedaliah, and he died. They also killed the Judeans and the Chaldeans who were present with him at Mitzpah. And all the people, young and old, and the officers of the troops set out and went to Egypt because they were afraid of the Chaldeans. In the 37th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin of Judah, on the 27th day of the 12th month, King Evil-Merodach of Babylon, in the year he became king, took note of King Jehoiachin of Judah and released him from prison. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a throne above those of other kings who were with him in Babylon. His prison garments were removed, and Jehoiachin received regular rations by his favor for the rest of his life. A regular allotment of food was given him at the king's behest, an allotment for each day, all the days of his life. And thus ends both kings.
Cool.
So the other note, just to capitalize on what I said earlier about the ark, when they go in and take all that was made of gold and everything that had gold. I mean, they do that with the bronze and silver as well, but the ark would be included.
Yeah, the traditional idea would be like they hid, the menorah, they hid the ark, they hid the table and maybe the little altar or whatever.
I mean, that place was lined with gold. Everywhere was fucking gold.
Hmm.
Well, according to the book, anyway.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So I should start commenting if nobody else. Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with verse 1. The dating of the siege of Jerusalem is generally taken to be 587, with the capture of Jerusalem occurring in 586. In Jewish halakha, the 10th day of the month Tevet, the 10th month, is a day of fasting, based on Zechariah 8:19, which mentions, quote, the 10th fasting, end quote, with Rabbi Akiva taking it to refer to the 10th of Tevet in Talmud Rosh Hashanah 18b. On verse 3, the 9th day of the 4th month. The Masoretic text does not mention the specific month, reading only in the 9th of the month, Batish al-Chodesh. According to Jeremiah 52:6, the capture of Jerusalem took place on the 4th month, i.e. Tammuz. Though Josephus in Antiquities 10:135 mentions the 4th month, it does not appear in early translations. Several commentators translate, several English translations like NRSV and ASB and NIV add the 4th month to this verse. And Peshitta reads, in the 5th month.
Yeah. I mean, there is tradition that the day that the temple was destroyed is it the 9th of Av?
The temple, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same with the second temple.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big fasting days as well.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's Shiva Asar Tammuz, which is 17th of Tammuz, which is, as you said, in the 4th month. Then Asar B'Tevet, which is the 10th of Tevet, which I guess is when the siege began, and then the 9th of Av, which is Tish B'Av. Yeah. Those are one of the three like major fasts besides Yom Kippur. Which is, yeah, well, it's 4 out of the 6 fasts of the year, so pretty much most of the fasts have got to do with the destruction of the first temple, really.
Yeah. Okay, on verses 4 and 5, Sweeney comments, with the exhaustion of food supplies in the city, the Babylonians would finally have been able to force a breach in the city's defenses, most likely along the northern walls of the city, where the ground is more level and susceptible to sappers. Compare Ezekiel 4:2, 8, 5-13. Zedekiah and his men would then have fled the city by way of a southern gate, away from the advancing Babylonians. The gate between the walls by the garden of the king appears to be the gate of the spring, that is, the gate at the southeastern edge of the city by En Rogel, i.e. Rogel Spring in Nehemiah 3:15. The point where the expanded wall of Jerusalem built by Hezekiah to enclose the western hill met the southern edges of the older defensive wall that enclosed the city of David. Zedekiah and his men fled by way of the Wadi Kelt, which could have led them to the fords south of Jericho, where the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. This route would have enabled them to cross over into the Dead Sea. This route would have enabled them to cross over into the Transjordanian region in an attempt to seek refuge. Zedekiah was captured in the plains of Jericho, where the Wadi Kelt opens into the dry broad plain of the Arabot Jericho. The Babylonians stationed forces in this region to subdue and control Judah outside of Jerusalem. And I should note that Rashi notes a midrash, which explains how the Chaldeans were able to find Zedekiah. So, quote, a cave went from his house until the plains of Jericho, and he fled through the cave. The Holy One, blessed is he, contained a deer walking on the roof of the cave, and the Chaldeans pursued the deer. And when they reached the cave's entrance in the plains of Jericho, they saw Zedekiah and captured him. This is what Ezekiel states, and I will spread my net over him, and he shall be caught in my snare. Ezekiel 12:13. Yeah. On verse 8, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard. He is mentioned as one of the courtiers of Nebuchadnezzar, named Nabu Zer-Idina in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, Anet 307, and his title there is the chief cook, Rab Nuchatimu. Cogan writes that in Mishnah Hebrew, Nachtom refers to a baker. He notes that unlike other titles, such as Rab Shakeh and Rab Saris, which were transliterated from Akkadian, here the title is translated into Hebrew, Rav Tabachim, with tabach meaning slaughter and cooking, as we see in 1 Samuel 8:13, 9 verses 23 and 24. Potiphar, Pharaoh's eunuch, is also given that title in Genesis 37:36. Rabel writes that the plural form tabachim includes the basic idea of slaughter or executioner, now held by one whose position enables the official initiation of such activity.
Did you read the? I think it's like Rashi's note about why he put him on trial. It's not really
no,
Rashi.
Wait.
It's a midrash in Nedarim, which says that Sidkiyahu had Zedekiah. He had discovered Nebuchadnezzar eating alive or uncooked rabbits, and the king Nebuchadnezzar made him swear not to tell anyone. And but Sidkiyahu had the oath nullified and revealed his secret. And so when Nebuchadnezzar found out that the people were making fun of him, he realized that Sidkiyahu had broken his promise. So this is why he put him on trial for breaking his promise or something.
I see. I see.
It's very stupid, but why not?
Yeah. Okay. On verses 9 through 12, Sweeney comments, the complete destruction of the city's wall would hardly be necessary. The Babylonians will destroy key points, gate areas, towers, and the like, to render Jerusalem's defensive walls useless without wasting the time and effort to pull down every inch. The notation concerning those exiled in verses 11 and 12 includes both those who remained in the city as well as those who had crossed over to the Babylonian side during the lengthy siege. The leading figures of Jerusalem were exiled with Jehoiachin in 597, see 2 Kings 24, 8-17, so this deportation would presumably involve fewer officials and artisans, see Jeremiah 52:29. Only poor vine dressers and farmers were left in the land, although Jeremiah 52:30 indicates that another 745 were exiled in Nebuchadnezzar's 23rd year following Gedaliah's assassination.
Yeah, they keep saying like he exiled everybody except for a little bit, and then the next time it's like he exiled everyone except for the few.
Yeah. On verse 12, fields. In Hebrew, it's yokvim. The exact meaning of this word is unclear. It also appears in Jeremiah 52:16. Septuagint reads gabin, and Targum, workers in the fields and in the vineyards, which Cogan takes as taking influence from the common pair field and vine in Exodus 22:4, Numbers 16:14, and 20:17. Rashi renders diggers of the earth, an expression of wine vats, yakavim, which are diggings in the ground. Kimchi notes that Rav Yosef in Talmud Shabbat 26a taught that yogvim refers to trappers of the snail, chilazon, from which the sky blue dye is produced, in the area between the promontory of Tyre and Haifa. Vulgate and BDB Dictionary render husbandmen, Peshita laborers, Helot and Rabiel farmers, Sweeney tillers, and Fritz tillers of the soil.
Yeah. By the way, the chilazon is not called a snail. I mean, I guess they didn't know what it was, but it's normally called a fish in like Talmudic references. I mean, then again, like seafood can be called which seafoods are called fish. I mean, I guess you have cuttlefish. It's a type of mollusk. It doesn't have it's not a bivalve, but it's called a fish by people, right? So the word fish could refer to those.
Called
as well.
whales fish. They called lobsters fish.
Yeah, fish just means something that swims, right?
Okay.
Or at least not. I think it worked in English as well at a certain point. That's why we have things like, cuttlefish,
shellfish,
shellfish. That's the word. Yeah, shellfish, exactly. Yeah. So it's a type of shellfish, but it's normally just called, a fish. And the idea was that the blood of this fish was the dye that would make the special blue dye that's mentioned in like Leviticus or whatever. And the Jewish tradition is that they lost the tradition of which is the animal that it comes from, and therefore they don't really use this blue dye for anything. But in modern times, we've actually discovered like modern sea like mollusks, like sea snails, that have like a purple bluish dye. I think it's like Mirax something, and they've like identified that, like, they were very sure that this is the blue dye that is mentioned in the Bible as techelet. But like most religious Jews don't use it, but there are certain like groups that will use it. So you might sometimes see people with like the fringes, like the tzitzit, like the white strings that they have hanging down, like by their waistband, from an undershirt or something. So certain groups will have like one blue string, because they are like, well, science found it, that's good enough for us. Like, but most religious Jews are like, we don't know what the animal is. We lost the tradition. There's no way of knowing. It's a mystery. When the Messiah comes, we'll be given it again, sort of thing.
Of course.
Whatever. Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Now, on 13 through 17, Fritz comments, the temple is plundered, as was the case under Jehoiachin in 2413. This time it is all bronze objects that are taken away to be melted down, together with the bronze covers of the 2 pillars of the temple, 1 Kings 7, 13 through 51. The mention of further equipment and gold and silver in verse 15 seems to be a later addition. The explanation of the pillars in verses 16 and 17 is certainly later, modeled on the description in 1 Kings 7, 15 through 22. On 18 through 21, Rabel comments, it is initially unclear what Nebuzaradan intends for the representative group he assembles. Each of the 3 orders of priests in verse 18 and 23:4 is represented. The chief priest, Kohen Harosh, is the high priest, HaKohen Gadol, of 22:4 and 23:4. With them are select city officials involved in military and advisory capacities, a scribe whose role in wartime has expanded to include the mustering of troops, and a representative selection of 60 enfranchised Judites. The worst is realized as they are presented to Nebuchadnezzar in Riblah and summarily slaughtered. Those left in the land are thus warned by Babylon's power against any who rebel.
I don't know where it's said, but I think maybe it's somewhere in Chronicles, but this Sariah is traditionally known as the son of Azariah, which is the son of Hilkiah. And I think, like, remember I mentioned a bulla about Hilkiah, the high priest? I think one of them actually says, like, Azariah is the son of Hilkiah. And traditionally, I think Jeremiah the prophet is also a son of Hilkiah. But I don't know where it says that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Sariah is possibly I think is also identified as the father of Ezra and Yehozadak, the high priest, which I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah. I think it's too soon.
Mm-hmm. On verse 22, Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan. Commentators note that Gedaliah came from an influential family from Jerusalem, which some of its members worked for the kingship. His grandfather Shaphan was a scribe during Josiah's days in 22:3, and Ahikam was part of the delegation that went to Huldah in 22:12, and even saved Jeremiah from a mob in Jeremiah 26:24. While some have suggested that Gedaliah was a nobleman who was close to the Judean king, like Rabel, Cogan, and Hens-Piazza, it is not explicitly told. There is a seal from Lachish which reads, "To Gedaliah the steward," which is often identified with Gedaliah son of Ahikam, but Fritz writes that it is not possible to identify the bearer of the name with certainty.
I mean, if he's the grandson of Shaphan, Shaphan also had like a job title that was like a steward or something, right?
I think the scribe?
The scribe, yeah, that makes sense, yeah. So it would make sense. It would make sense if that this Gedaliah was like, if it's the same Shaphan, then it makes sense that he would have been close to the palace.
Mm-hmm. On verse 23, Sweeney comments, the men mentioned here come to Gedaliah to recognize his authority. Yishmael ben Nathaniah, described as a member of the royal line below, later assassinates Gedaliah in a bid to restore Judean independence and perhaps the Davidic line. See verses 25 and 26 and the full account in Jeremiah 41. Yochanan ben Kareach led the forces that put down Ishmael's attempted coup in Jeremiah 41, 11 through 18, and later led a faction that took Jeremiah with them to Egypt in Jeremiah 42 and 43. Seraiah ben Tanchumeth, the Netophite, was from Netophah, and is perhaps to be identified with Ein an Natuf, or Nauf spring, south of Bethlehem. Compare Ezra 2:22 and Nehemiah 7:26. Yaazniah, the Ma'achathite, comes from the Ma'acha, a Calebite clan from Judah, as it's seen 1 Chronicles 2:48, and compare 2 Samuel 23:34, 1 Chronicles 4:19. A seal was found at Tel Es Naspe, reading, belonging to Yaazniah, servant of the king.
That's cool.
Yeah. On verse 25, no reason is given for Gedaliah's assassination. The text claims that Ishmael was from royal descent, which might indicate that Ishmael wished to restore Judean independence and the authority of the house of David. The assassination, however, has little effect and causes the flight of the remaining population. A fuller description of the event is attested in Jeremiah 41, 1-15. In Jewish halakha, Gedaliah's assassination is remembered through a fast called Tzom Gedalia, or the Gedalia fast, beginning in the third day of Tishrei. According to Talmud Rosh Hashanah 18b, this fast was established, quote, to teach you that the death of the righteous is equivalent to the burning of the temple of the Lord, end quote.
I didn't know it was that this Gedalia. Yeah, Tzom
Yeah,
Gedalia, the fast of Gedalia is the day after. It's the day after Rosh Hashanah, outside of Israel, and 2 days after inside Israel.
Yeah.
Oh, no, what am I saying? You have 2 days in Israel as well, so it's always the day after. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On 27 through 30, the exact purpose of the final unit is uncertain. Fritz writes that this unit probably relies on a folk tradition well known among the exiles. Its origin is lost, but its aim is to introduce a note of hopefulness that the Davidic monarchy might not be finally destroyed. Sweeney, however, who takes the unit to be the work of the exilic DH, writes that the unit points to the demise of the house of David as the ruling monarchy of Israel or Judah in Jerusalem. He writes that such a view is consistent with statements concerning the role of the Davidic promise in Kings, that a son of David would sit on the throne only as long as the monarchs observed the will of Yahweh, as we see in 1 Kings 2, 1-4, 8, 22-26, and 9, 3-9. Cogan, however, writes that this unit has no signs of Deuteronomistic editing, neither in language nor viewpoint. He writes that while the exiles may have cheered up over the king's pardon and his favored position, for the Book of Kings, the end is bitter, without any hope for the future of the exiled people. According to Deuteronomy, the return of Israel demanded a return to Yahweh, as we see in Deuteronomy 4, 30, and 31, emphasized in Solomon's prayer in 1 Kings 8, 46-53. This viewpoint was not adopted by the late Deuteronomistic author, who was responsible for the final edition of Kings. And Cogan further writes, quote, perhaps the destruction in Jerusalem and the difficulties of the exile were too close for him to adopt any hope for the future. He had no answer for the Judean people who were just exiled, and he left the subject of rehabilitation for others, end quote.
Yeah.
So in verse 27, no, that's not my final verse. So in verse 27, Awel Marduk, in Hebrew Evil Merodach, known in extra biblical sources as Amel Marduk. He was the son of and heir of Nebuchadnezzar, ruling from 562 through 560. Stefani Anthonios in EBR Online on Evil Merodach notes that very little is known in his time. Quote, no royal inscriptions have been found detailing military campaigns or reporting building activities. He is not even mentioned in the Babylonian Chronicles, though an historical epic fragment describes his improper behavior and sudden change of heart. A few vase fragments and some contract tablets have also survived, end quote. His Hebrew name might be a pun, with evil meaning foolish, but it could also be that the change between Mem and Vav was typical in late Akkadian. And Rashi, based on Seder Olam Rabbah 26, writes, quote, in Jeremiah it states, on the 25th, in 5231, rather, on the 25th, Nebuchadnezzar died, and he was buried on the 26th. On the 27th, evil Merodach removed him from his grave and dragged him about in order to nullify his decrees, as it is stated in Isaiah 14:19, and you have been cast out of your grave like a despised sapling, etc.
I think Kimchi has an addition to this, no?
Let me see.
I can read it. Yeah, it says Evil-Merodach was afraid that his father was not really dead and would return to claim his throne. This happened before when Nebuchadnezzar became insane, which we'll read about in Daniel, I guess. He left his throne and lived as a wild beast for 7 years. See Daniel. In the interim, one of his sons was appointed in his place. When Nebuchadnezzar came back, he imprisoned his son. Evil-Merodach wanted to make sure that would not happen again, and he therefore had Nebuchadnezzar's body removed from his grave and dragged him along the ground, thus fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy. Okay, that makes sense. As an explanation of why he would do that, but we don't necessarily know he did it. I mean, it's possible that, we have evidence that he really existed as the son of Nebuchadnezzar, but he doesn't seem to have. Maybe he didn't have a long reign, didn't do much. Maybe he was the type of person not to get into a lot of wars. Maybe he was happy, being ruling his people or whatever, and it seems to have been nice enough to take his hostages and look after them, even if he didn't let them go home. He's like, this is a king, I should treat them better. So yeah, could have been just one of those type of kings that just wasn't out there to make a name for themselves.
And my final comment for this chapter and for Kings, he released Jehoiakim, king of Judah, from prison. Jehoiakim's release may have been represented an act of amnesty granted at the beginning of the new king's reign, according to Sweeney and Raybill, or as part of a custom of releasing prisoners towards the coming of the new year, according to Cogan following Becking. Fritz writes that the privileges given to the king might not have had a decisive change of his actual conditions in court, but rather a modification of the protocol, which raised his standing as the erstwhile king of Judah among the other prisoners of royal origin.
I mean, the way it's written is like he raised his head, right?
It reads. Sorry. Wait about the word.
Yeah, he Nasa blah 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 et rosh.
Nasa evin merodach. Yeah. The head of Jehoiakim. Yeah.
He like raised his head, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm done. No ancient Christians.
Really? They have nothing to say about the destruction of the first temple and the end of 2 kings?
I got one final comment.
Yeah, no.
Taylor Rourke offers $1.99 and says, "Keep up the good work. I worry for our future." Well, that's the human way, worrying about the future. They always have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty worried about the future too.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I should go to with the recent cuts to education. I don't even know if I should go to grad school or something. I have no idea how it's all gonna go.
Well, I'd hate to see you throw away all the foundational work that you've got so far.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else, Tomer?
No, that's it.
Okay. So we are finally out of Kings, and we are finally over to Chronicles.
Yes. But you should know, Aaron. The first 9 chapters are
suffer.
Gonna
suffer.
suck.
Suffer in silence.
You're gonna have a bad time. It is a genealogy.
Kinda.
I'll read
there
all
are a couple other notes, but
yes.
it's a genealogy.
It is a genealogy, yes, but I will say, if I would love to do a verse by verse commentary on Chronicles, because honestly, it's such a fascinating text. Like, there is so many textual variations. There's so many things to point out in all the genealogies that it's just very fascinating, and all the interpretations given there, especially the Targum and the traditionals. It's such a it's the ugly duckling of the Bible, and it's very it's neglected, but it's I don't know. I really enjoy reading through it. At least reading the all the like discrepancies and interesting bits that are in it. So
yeah, but you also like math. So
yes,
I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, I'll practice up, how to mispronounce these names.
Yeah,
I'll read every chapter 3 times before, so I can read as fast as possible.
And before you should worry, I limit myself to 5 chapters for chapters 1 through 9, as Papa Lawrence asked me to.
I'm going to be going over some of the notes that you sent. So maybe there's something. Maybe there's another way to shorten it up, because honestly, this shit was hell for the Atheist Sunday School
read it properly.
episode of First Chronicles. We did, because it was a genealogy and I didn't want to spend 2 weeks in it. We did it all in one go, 1 through 9. And the background that we used was just a tear, someone crying, because it was very sad. So it is hell to get through. And yes, some of the discrepancies are interesting.
I mean, look at the modern commentators. They have like pages and pages of like stuff over everything that's in it. So you will always find something there. I mean, Knopper's commentaries on 1 through 9 of the genealogies, sure, yeah. And it's like a book, like a 1 volume of it. So, yeah.
So we can have fun.
If I put on my real country hick accent like my family speaks with, I could have some fun with this first chapter.
Yeah,
I'm sure you will. Are you looking at some of the names right now?
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, good luck with that. Make sure to
all
join
9
the
chapters.
Discord. Everyone should do that.
I mean, if you want, we can do the Jewish order and go to Isaiah instead, but...
I mean, I've already prepared my commentaries, Isaac.
Right.
Don't fuck it up for
funny.
me. I need to buy... I haven't bought all the books for it.
We are not meeting up this Saturday because, importantly, Tomer has a thing that he's got, and less importantly, me and Lilandra and Matt Dillahunty and Arden Hart are all going to be at the North American Reptile Breeders Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you are.
Yeah, Dallas Market Hall.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll meet up next week.
Yep, on Saturday.
On the weekend. And the rest of the world that does daylight saving will have caught up with America. So if you were used to having the show being an hour earlier than usual, it will be back to the time that it was. So
all right. Good night,
I gotta go do an atheist meetup. Good night, everyone.
Enjoy.
As one would.
Everyone.
Bye.